Howdy, hope you're doing well. Now, once you recognize that the evidence of the senses and perceptual experience are valid, there's a lot that comes from that. Um, Sometimes, because of some bad philosophical ideas, some people might make mistakes. So, case in point, Dr. Rob Gray, Arizona State University, um, right on good scientific work about how perception and perceptual experience are valid and they are a warrant for moving through the environment for humans, for animals, but wrong on induction. He doesn't grasp how induction works or how perception is a warrant for it. So, first, Dr. Rob Gray, great work. I love to listen to his podcast. Some episodes listen to over and over again. Good stuff, good work, interesting. We need more of that. He and his guests are doing some important work in psychology, philosophy of psychology, philosophy of perception, skill development, sports, theory and practice, helping make the science of psychology better and our world better. I like the work they are doing and the fight they are fighting, so to speak, and how they're developing some of J.J. Gibson's ideas, talking about Gibson's ideas, spreading them, developing them, helping make psychology better, tying psychology to a better philosophy and therefore to other areas of life, sports, movement. And then there's a lot of social behavior stuff that is to be delved into and figured out in terms of the ecological approach and a more rational approach to perception and movement, and tying it into the work of physics, chemistry, biology, all that, with some similar philosophic fundamentals. But good work, great, thank you, and some good books. How We Learn to Move, good book, I recommend it. I think I've listened to that maybe at least twice on Audible so far. And then other books by Rob Gray, besides this one, Learning to Be an Ecological Coach, Learning to Optimize Movement. I've got those on Audible and listened to them. Then looking these up, I saw a new one came out, January 2026, I forgot about. He mentioned it in his podcast, but I forgot. The Advanced Ecological Approach to Skill Development and Maintenance. So, just a bit ago, since I saw that, I got that on Audible. But, good work. Podcasts, books, scientific research, working with sports teams, all this other stuff. Valuable. I'm glad. I much appreciate it. Deeply indebted. And it's reminded me about J.J. Gibson, who I heard about a long time ago. Reminded me, gave me some motivation to dig into his work. And so I've read parts of his articles. I need to sit down and do more, have it more comprehensive. But, work gets in the way sometimes. But that's another good thing that Rob Gray's done. So thank you, Dr. Gray, for these things. And that's, so I've read part of the ecological approach to visual perception, first 60 or 100 pages or something. I need to finish, dig in more in review. So good stuff. But great scientific work, awesome. But then we got this.
They're not just collections.
Yes. Rather than simply reacting to triggering stimuli, organisms cleverly exploit the information about their surroundings and their movements to control their actions both retrospectively, after the fact, and prospectively, before the fact. So this is the touching, right? We can take in what we've done and use it to do something different in the future without memory, and we can act towards the future without predicting or planning.
Yeah.
right? Which always gives people makes their head hurt, right? Right.
Yes,
That's
yes.
perspective, yeah.
Yeah, and he gets into this in 24, doesn't he? This.
Yeah, and he said the difference between an
Yeah.
expectation of what might occur and the specification of what might occur.
Yeah. And so there's a nice phrase from a paper by Bootsma called the current future, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does talk about that at the end, doesn't he? Yeah, the current future is the last.
Yeah, that's a I love that.
So Fagin's latched onto this quote as well because it's a nice way of sort of talking about the information that is currently available to you specifies what will happen next.
Nothing else changes.
If the task.
Like it says, if nothing else changes. Remember that, please. It said information will specify something if nothing else changes. If the context is the same.
If the task dynamics don't change. If things continue to proceed the way they have been proceeding, this is what will come next. And so you've got current.
Right, in that context. There's no need for prediction. There's just using past knowledge in the same way. You don't got to predict. You don't got to expect. You just got to do what you've seen done in a cause-effect context and then be ready to adapt. Because most of us know that we don't know everything and we're not omniscient, and there's like a hidden premise we don't identify, that we have to continue learning things. We got to be aware of the new. We can rely on what we know, but we learn. But we rely on what we know, but we look for more information. We don't try to dictate the world.
This is what will come next, and so you've got current access through information to the future, right? Why? And again, it's because things unfold in a lawful manner out in the world. Because the information about those things unfolding lawfully is also lawful, right? Again, it's laws, right? Laws shouldn't get any of this, right? And then he's pointing out that it has to be this way because the whole section about the problem of induction is predicting the future, expectation of what might occur, trying to figure out on the basis of past experience what's going to happen next is an example of induction. And the problem with induction is you always run the risk of being wrong. Right? You just can't generate enough previous activity to be definitely right about things, right? So if we were operating on the basis of induction, we'd be screwed.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
Wrong, totally invalid, 100% wrong there. We can operate on induction, but you got to know what it is. There's a mistake where Dr. Gray goes off the rails, unfortunately, but it's a contradiction. So you're saying there's Tao, and there's laws of movement, but you can't trust induction? Which is it? It's a contradiction. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim induction is not valid. It's only probable. There's a problem of induction, which came from David Hume. And you can't claim that and then claim all this stuff about the ecological approach, surfaces, Tao, laws of perception, laws of movement, so on and so forth. It doesn't work, and then you're contradicting yourself. And then without induction, there is no science. That's a lot about what it's about. A philosophy of science tells you how to form concepts and how to form generalizations. Those are the things about it in a certain field. And from some stuff Dr. Gray said, thankfully he knows that some of the stuff is important. Some of the work that Gibson did, he looked at the philosophy of psychology. He got down to the fundamental root of things and developed from there. And that's something that Dr. Gray has recognized in some of what he says. There's a Cartesian approach, there's the ecological approach, and the twain do not meet. But induction is valid. And if you don't say that, you're contradicting what you're doing. You know, there can't be a science. As I say, science is about that. It's about forming generalizations. That's what laws and principles are. They're very broad, abstract generalizations. You go from, let's say, dog, squirrel, dog stuff, squirrel stuff, skunk stuff, mammal stuff, life stuff. You get stuff about animals from the different animals. And you got to have other generalizations before that. But that's how theories come about, getting more and more abstract explanations and all that. But science would fall apart. And then, you know, if you're doing all this research, it's going to, like, if you really took seriously that induction is invalid, there's a problem of induction, well, that's going to affect you psychologically. Why do this? Oh, there's not really Tao. That's just, it doesn't work in the future. It's just something, a habit that I developed, like, that worked sometimes in the past. So why should we bother? Why should I apply it to this sports team and this sports team and stuff? Because, you know, it's not a generalization. There's no generalizations. There's nothing that's universally true of all of it, one kind of thing interacting with another in a certain causal context. It's, you know, it's never that way. It's never water running downhill only under the influence of gravity. That's not a valid generalization, you know. Obviously, it is a valid generalization. We know water always goes downhill when the only force acting is gravity, and we're on the surface of the earth. Universal, time and place, it always happens, as long as that's the only force. And, you know, if you're not committed to that and you don't get that those happen, it's going to affect you psychologically. You're going to give up on your work. You're going to not think that you got something valid to say or something applicable beyond some immediate little atom. There'd be no applicability to different places and to different times, different situations. You give up on your ability to think. So science falls, if you think about what it would really mean if there really are no valid generalizations, if there's a problem of induction, why try generalizing at all? It's just a habit. It's just a custom, David Hume says. It's just our society. That's just what we believe. So whatever. So are you really finding truth? No. You're just playing a game. And, like, why be committed to that and say it's science? It's not, you know? And then, how are you gonna, like, there's the nature of science itself. There's your psychology. Then what about your science, you know? The ecological approach. How can you defend it to someone else if you're claiming there's a problem of our generalizations? Hey, I'd like to teach this to your sports team, but yeah, I don't know if it will work, you know? It's not really, probably won't work because I got this here and, you know, there's a problem with my generalization, there's a problem with Tao, there's a problem with thinking that when something changes in your visual field, it doesn't really mean necessarily you're getting closer together, maybe not, I don't know, you know, sometimes, but possibly, but I don't even know what I don't know means, because I don't know is just like a habit and a custom, and there's no certainty in our induction about what I don't know means or how it relates to the rest of my knowledge or how it affects people. You know, I mean, clearly that's silly. You don't do that. Induction is valid. Please don't think it's not, you know? So it matters. It matters what you think about induction and what you think about your philosophic framework. As, you know, like Rob Gray has said in some of the podcasts themselves, the premises matter, and some things can't be mixed. You can't get a little Descartes, a little of this, a little of that, a little ecological approach and put it together into some kind of consistent, effective training method, you know? But the problem is only one for rationalists like Hume. Side note, I know Plato is a rationalist and David Hume is an empiricist. What I'm talking about here is they're similar in their rejection of induction as valid. Plato, Immanuel Kant, Descartes, Hume, Karl Popper, and they're similar in their rejection of it and their not finding perceptual experience as a warrant or grounds validly for induction. So that's like the point here. But yeah, I know Hume is not classified in philosophy as a rationalist. He's classified as an empiricist, but he still has some ideas about pure reasoning, so to speak. Like it says here, for example, in the Great Wikipedia, quote, continuing this idea, Hume argues that only in the pure realm of ideas, logic and mathematics, not contingent on the direct sense awareness of reality, can causation safely be applied. All other sciences are reduced to probability, unquote, which I reject. I reject that premise, but he's similar there to, as I say, to some of these others, and like that's kind of the point here. If you're in the Plato, Immanuel Kant, Popper, Hume camp, Plato, Immanuel Kant, Karl Popper, David Hume, Rene Descartes, if you're in that kind of camp, that kind of school of philosophy, then yeah, okay, there could be a problem. But it's not a universal problem for all people in all philosophical schools. So for example, like the problem of evil is only a problem for some people who believe in, a Christian God that's omniscient and omnipotent. If you don't believe in that, there is no problem of evil. Or the problem of free will. If you don't believe in a Christian God that's omniscient and omnipotent, you don't wonder, how can we make choices that are not predetermined if God has already determined them? It's not a problem. Or there's no problem of application in math if you have a good philosophy of mathematics. If you think like Kant, Immanuel Kant, that you start with little sets. You got the set of 0 and that's 1, and then 0 and 1 makes 2, and a bunch of nonsense like that. And that's where math comes from. Then there'll be a problem of application of mathematics. Or if you think math is just symbol manipulation, all we're doing is manipulating symbols. There's no meaning. It's not conceptual. We didn't get anything from the world. We're just manipulating symbols socially. If you have that, there's a problem of application. But if you grasp how we get math from perceptual experience, there's no problem because that's where it comes from in the first place. Or, there's no problem of application of astronomy to the way the stars are on the calendar if you have a good astronomy that is based on Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton's ideas rather than Ptolemy's ideas with empty circles going around empty circles. So some things depend on your philosophic fundamentals and your perspective. There's only a problem of induction for the rationalist who doesn't grasp that perception is information rich. So it's only a problem for some. Like E. Bright Wilson, who was a professor of chemistry at Harvard, said in his book, An Introduction to Scientific Research, he said, practical scientists who rashly allow themselves to listen to philosophers, unquote, bad philosophers that is, not good ones, But, quote, practical scientists who rashly allow themselves to listen to philosophers are likely to go away in a discouraged frame of mind, convinced that there is no logical foundation for the things that they do, that all their alleged scientific laws are without justification, and that they are living in a world of naive illusion. Of course, once they get out into the sunlight again, they know that this is not so, that scientific principles do work. Bridges stay up, eclipses occur on schedule, and atomic bombs go off. Nevertheless, it is very unsatisfactory that no generally acceptable theory of scientific inference has yet been put forward. Mistakes are often made which would presumably not have been made if a consistent and satisfactory basic philosophy had been followed. Period, unquote. True. You might think there's no logical foundation. Oh, induction's invalid, we can't trust it, for science. Yet, while you're coming up, people are making up principles, identified principles in physics. Galileo did. Darwin did in biology. Gibson did in the ecological approach. You got principles. You got causation. You got generalizations about surfaces and things, and ambient light versus the light ray and all that. Or likewise, stuff's invalid, you can't do it. Yet, the principles of the ecological approach do work. Hawks catch prey, bobcats catch prey, humans play games, and so on, play sports. All right, another side note in regard to this. Gregor Ohm developed his Ohm's laws, V equals IR in electric circuits. Voltage is current times resistance through experimentation. It was rejected by some German scientists who were more Platonic. They said it wasn't developed through pure reasoning, so it was invalid. And they were wrong. Ohm was right. We know Ohm's law is valid in different times, in different places, regardless of time, regardless of place. When certain things interact in a certain way, you got Ohm's law. And we also have the case of Ignaz Semmelweis, not sure about pronouncing his first name, but he figured out that when doctors wash their hands, it cut down significantly on the incidence of disease. He didn't have the right explanation, the right why, but he showed validly, inductively, that it was the case. But again, he was laughed at by some rationalistic doctors lost in their head who said, they're gentlemen, how dare you call them dirty? How could they possibly be dirty when they're gentlemen? Bunch of nonsense. But there's another of many other cases where induction is shown to be valid. We know different places, different times. When you wash your hands, certain conditions and everything, then you cut down on disease spread. It's causally proven. People pretty much accept it. But there's another case right there, among others. So, as E. Bright Wilson says, some of this stuff is invalid. It's a problem, as I say, only for certain people with certain principles, certain philosophical foundations. If you reject it, you look at the real world. Looking at the real world helps you reject it. It's not a problem, especially if you have the ecological approach where you grasp that perception and perceptual experience are valid and are information rich. But, based on your own experience, things like E. Bright Wilson points out, if you look at that, you see there's a justification for what you do. Galileo, Newton, Darwin, Gibson, they knew induction was valid. Here's and that they knew that perception's information rich, and we can get knowledge from experience. We get knowledge from experience, we can form concepts from it that are valid, we can get inductions that are valid. That comes from some of Aristotle's basic ideas. Study the history of philosophy, history and philosophy of physics, and you'll see Galileo himself says okay, here's from the second letter of Galileo Galilei to Mark Welser on sunspots, which is on page 118 of Discoveries and Opinions of Galileo, or at least my edition, the book translated by Stillman Drake. Here's Galileo himself. Quote, I should even think that in making the celestial material alterable, I contradict the doctrine of Aristotle much less than do those people who still want to keep the sky inalterable. For I am sure that he never took its inalterability to be as certain as the fact that all human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience, unquote. So, because of what was known at the time, the limited knowledge of physics and chemistry and the technology they had, Aristotle, like everyone else at the time, most everyone else, thought that, oh, things in the heavens never change. They're always the same. Same course all the time. Look in the records in the Egyptians and Mesopotamians kept. Same thing time after time after time. Same stars, same sun. Nothing ever changes. The Big Dipper doesn't become a bear, which becomes Orion's belt or something. You know, same stuff, same place, same look, always there, never changing. Going through the same course. You know, that's what they knew. So the celestial material was unalterable. But Galileo did some stuff and found that, whoa, there is change out there. And like he says, it kind of implies if Aristotle was alive at Galileo's time and had that knowledge, then he would have different ideas about how the solar system worked, because direct experience comes first. Human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience. And as Newton said in his Rules of Reasoning and Science in the Principia, Rule 1, quote, we are to admit no more causes of natural things than such as are both true and sufficient to explain their appearances, unquote. So there he's talking about causation. He's a better philosopher, metaphysician, and epistemologist than David Hume. Galileo and Newton knew that there was causation in the world, and we could generalize about it and about the things in the world, and he didn't get confused about it like David Hume did. Galileo and Newton, again, they don't have that problem because they're not rationalists like Plato and Descartes. No problem when you have the right philosophic fundamentals. Then there's Rule 2, Rule 3, Rule 4, quote, in experimental philosophy, we are to look upon propositions inferred by general induction from phenomena as accurately or very nearly true, notwithstanding any contrary hypothesis that may be imagined, till such time as other phenomena occur by which they may be made more accurate or liable to exceptions, unquote. Notice he didn't say like the nonsense of Karl Popper that, oh, all you can do is falsify and one thing throws everything out of the water and we got to start all over again and that kind of silliness. No. Newton was a better epistemologist than Popper. We can generalize. Newton got things by general induction. And then he knew that if you got it and it was reasoned out validly from the evidence of the senses, then you could refine what you knew, add more context to it, bring in other causal factors into play, but it was still true. Just like Rod Bray said in here, things will be the same unless a different factor comes into play. Or like someone else in here, talking about Tuvi's lectures with him, someone else says, if the dynamic environment changes, then there's a different situation, things will change. That's kind of what Newton's saying here. We can generalize, we can induce, induction is valid, there's no problem with it. We can get something true, and then we hold on to that, and we can refine it the more we learn. Just like learning about the orbits, and they're elliptical, and then we see, whoa, they can actually like move a little bit and vibrate. But you first have to know about the ellipse. You generalize all planets go in elliptical orbits. And then you can learn more about them, developing on that or refining it, but not contradicting it, because you're using that knowledge to get something new. You're not throwing that away. Oh, they're not elliptical, they're something else. They're elliptical, then we refine. Or you learn something about how animals move, it's valid, then you can seek refinements of that, or more generalizations from that. And then when he says here, notwithstanding any contrary hypothesis that may be imagined, from what I understand, hypothesis meant something different in Newton's time than our time. And notice he says may be imagined. So here, like you, okay, like Dr. Rob Gray, like he's saying, Descartes is out. All this stuff that people make up and imagine, no. I don't care about any contrary hypothesis that someone just might make up in their head. It's got to be evidence. It's got to be based on the evidence of the senses, reasoned from there. We need valid inductions. That's how science is done. It's not done by making stuff up in our imagination, as Plato and Immanuel Kant and Descartes and David Hume would say. Maybe not David Hume. Maybe he'd try to be a little more empirical, but still, he's dismissing induction, dismissing causation. So, he's wrong. But notice how what Newton said is basically what Gibson did. It's what Darwin did. You look at that, study the history and philosophy of science, and you'll see, that'll help you see that induction is valid. It's warranted. But of course, in some ways, you just get it by your own observation. But Darwin generalized, it's valid. And again, you got like the problem of whatever, okay? It's not going to be the case. There's going to be a problem of fossils or something if you think the world is only 6,000 years old. If there's that, then there's a problem with some of this stuff. If not, then not, Gibson, Newton, Darwin, Galileo, they knew induction was invalid. So let's please be consistent with the ecological approach and grasp that too. It's not a problem because perception is information rich. It's a warrant for our movement and it's a warrant for our thinking. Things are valid. And you got to remember, to explain a little more, Hume was trying to prove things, trying to find causation or induction in reason itself, but you can't. And he was, maybe doing it on purpose, maybe writing all this stuff to try to invalidate induction, invalidate causation, and then what kind of a world do we live in then? think about what his motives might have been. Why would you write that and publish it to say, hey, world, let's all say causation's invalid and induction's invalid. You know, then if causation's invalid, if it's a conjunction, what about crime? You know, or what about someone hitting you? Well, I don't really know that hit me. There was just some conjunction. You know, this event conjoined with this one, conjoined with this one, but did they really hit me? I don't know. Was it really a cause? I don't know. It's just conjunction. You know, did someone really run over that person, commit some crime, or steal something? I don't know. It's just a conjunction. There's no causation. You can't prove it. You know, silly. But I totally disagree with that. There's causation in the world. An induction is valid. There's uniformity, and yeah, you can't prove it as Hume was trying, but you can validate it, and there's a difference. Some stuff is justified in perceptual experience. You cannot prove it. Okay, think about how a geometric proof works. You know, can you start with, like, let's say you want to prove something about a rectangle. You start with a rectangle, certain characteristics, then you draw a diagonal, and you can show that the two triangles, the rectangle cut into two triangles by the diagonal, you can show they're congruent. But you got to have a starting point. You can't start with nothing and prove that two triangles that you don't even know about are congruent. So likewise here, there's got to be a starting point for something, and if you're going to reason out and try to prove in reasoning and thought that uniformity exists or causation exists, well, like, where are you going to get that? You're going to start with things aren't caused and get their cause? It's impossible. That's ludicrous. You don't. You get the information in perception, not experience. You perceive that there's cause effect, and then you observe it. It's an axiom. Without cause effect, you can't do anything. You can't think. You can't draw conclusions. You can't connect ideas. You can't move. There is no possibility. It's gone. You can't write a book like Hume did. You can't expect other people to read it and make sense of it like you did. So on and so on and so on and so forth. Just so many contradictions in claiming that causation doesn't exist. That it's just a habit or custom. Ludicrous. You know, it's not going to be something that someone like this gets. If you're like Newton, Gibson, then you got an Aristotelian perspective. You can grasp it. Whoa, we can identify conceptually certain things that we perceive. We have an information-rich environment. We have direct experience of things in the world. Things, how they interact with other things. We see that there's this uniformity, there's causation, there's things of identity, they are what they are. I don't care if someone says, oh, I can conceive of a different cause, therefore I can't trust causation. They're lost in their head. I don't really care. Prove it. That crud does not work in science, as Newton so aptly pointed out. I don't care, he said, I don't care about any hypothesis someone can imagine. It's got to come from the evidence of the senses. If it doesn't, then you ain't worth my time. Okay? Same thing here. It's got to come from the evidence of the senses. You look at that. You don't get some stuff in reasoning, detached from it, like irrationals. There's stuff we see axiomatically. Things are what they are. Wherever you look, wherever you go, that's how they are. I don't care what someone can imagine. Oh, I can imagine a clock becoming a lamp, becoming a tiger, and then attacking me. You know, that's not science. That's not factual. That's not reasoning. That's storytelling imagination. I don't care. Okay? Hume can say whatever he wants, but if he ain't got the facts to back it up, I don't care. It's wrong. That's his approach. It ain't mine. I go with more of a Newtonian, Gibsonian, Darwinian, Aristotelian approach. And so that's not a problem. I can see causation in the world. I can observe it and identify it conceptually. No reasoning, just observation. Just like if I see there's a dog. Is Hume going to ask me to prove there's a dog? No. I just point. It's demonstrative. Look, it's there. For those who have eyes, can't you see it? If you don't, can you feel it? There is no proof. There's just direct experience. That's the warrant for saying there's a dog there. Same thing with some of the other stuff. Things are what they are. That's axiomatic. Causation exists. That's axiomatic. Without those, there is no anything. There's no reasoning. There's no Hume. There's no writing a book. There's no books being books. There's no words being words. There's no printing press being a printing press or anything like that. It's all gone. And then his idea that what we think of causation, it just comes from habit. So cognitively, we did this habit or custom, and then we'd abstract away from these to get causation, or just call that a different word for it would be causation, however he wants to look at it. It's backwards. And by what he means is, like yesterday, for example, I'm hiking up and down this hill, doing laps with this app on my, keeping track of laps with an app on my phone. Go up, lap, go down, lap, then I can keep track of how long it took me to go up and down. And so this one app would always make a noise, and then a voice would say lap, or at the end, stop, but I'd turn the voice off because I didn't want the noise. Should have done that a long time ago. After all these years, I finally did it. But I pressed lap, and I kind of felt the noise in lap. That's the habit he's talking about. But that's backwards. The habit doesn't give rise to the idea of causation. It's because we have causation in the world that gives rise to the habit. That's where it comes from. Or think of other things in your life. Like you get a cup of coffee and you bring it up and you're expecting to have a certain flavor and warmth in your mouth and on your tongue and so on and so forth, and to feel a certain way. But if something happened and you didn't, if it got knocked out of your hand, you still might feel it. It gets close, it gets knocked out of your hand, you still might feel it, but it's not actually happening. But it's because causation leads to the habit or experience happening. It's not the habit leads to the idea of causation. It's wrong. Besides, why do we have habits? Where do they come from? What causes them? Why are they psychological instead of something else? So he's begging the question in the logical sense of the word. Begging the question in logic means assuming what you want to prove and then claiming it's done. You're in a debate. Hey, can we assume this is true? Okay, I won. It's kind of like that, as opposed to the way some people use the phrase begging the question nowadays. But because there's causation, we get certain habits and certain things get wired into us in our memory, and that gives rise to the habit or whatever. It's not the other way around. I do not get causation from habit. I know I can form habits because of causation. I can repeat something over and over again, and then it becomes habit from the causation. So that whole idea that, it can't be cognitive, it's got to be psychological, is like invalid. Again, that's a problem, or it's an explanation only for this, not for this. So please, get that induction is valid. And then a problem here, again, is trying to prove some of these things and not realizing the different ways we have to do things in logic and epistemology with a certain approach. Yeah, if you think like Plato that all perceptual experience is full of lies and illusions, or if you're like some people who think perceptual experience is information defective or deficient, if you have that, then maybe you think you can prove it, but I don't. I think they're wrong. These people think they're wrong. Proving something is more a matter of being like a geometric proof, like a deduction. We start with certain things and then we develop it. And some stuff you can't prove. You can't prove the uniformity of nature because you got to start with something like that to get it. You got to start with causation. You got to start with things being generally the same. You got to start with the law of identity. You know, they're what you need to do any proof at all. For a proof to be what it is. For a proof to cause something to happen. For one thing to lead causally to a conclusion. You got to have cause in the first place. Things have to be what they are. You can validate something, which is just pointing it out. It's more general than proof. It's showing that something's true, just like demonstrative. There's a dog. I don't prove it. I don't induce it. I don't deduce it. I just look. And that's one thing to do with some of this. You don't prove the axiomatic. You just look and see. And he's expecting maybe you're omniscient, but we don't have to be omniscient in this either. We just have to use what's given. So hopefully that helps. Helps you see what's going on. Why someone says there's a problem of induction and that it's not really a problem for some people. People use induction and it's valid. What we should do is delve into the depth and breadth of what it means for the evidence of the senses to be valid and get that across the board philosophically, not just in the ecological approach to visual perception, but in other things as well. How does it tie down in fundamentals to physics and chemistry and biology, not just movement and animal behavior and some things like that? Try to have a more whole, consistent system. As you know, we shouldn't get little element of Descartes, little element of Hume, little element of Plato, little element of Aristotle, little element of Gibson, and try to clobber it together. It won't work. So I'm glad, Rob Gray says in his podcast how some of that doesn't work in some training methods. You got to look at it's the ecological approach or something else, but not both. So hopefully that helps. And there's more work to do. Just like once upon a time, people thought deduction, like they didn't understand deduction. That had to be proven too, Aristotle identified what deduction was, systematically went through, found all these different forms of induction, developed that part of logic. Some other stuff has been done since him, but he did a lot of that just on his own single-handedly. And before then, people would argue they wouldn't have these rules of valid deduction. That doesn't mean that there's a problem of deduction, or there's a problem of reasoning, or a problem of observation. It just means people have to figure out when deduction is valid, when is thinking valid, when is an argument valid. People can go wrong on deduction, go wrong on thinking, go wrong on argumentation, but there's not a problem of it because we know how to do it. Same thing with induction. There's not a problem of induction, there's a problem of philosophic perspective. Induction is fine. What we need to do is delve into this more and into epistemology and logic and think, okay, be scientific about it. What are the mechanics of induction? When is induction valid? When is it invalid? do that just as Aristotle and others did that with deduction. What is a valid deduction? When does it go wrong? What are the mechanics of it? How can we analyze it? We should do the same thing with induction, as I say. Then we'll be better off, just as E. Bright Wilson said. We should not listen to some of these bad philosophers. We should figure out what's right and what's consistent with our approach. Think about the ecological approach to visual perception, what the philosophic fundamentals are, and go from there. So, hope this helped. We can be more consistent in our personal lives, psychology, science, what we're doing, and then not like contradict ourselves or kind of feed into people who don't have things correct. So again, hope that helps. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.